compound effect of those negotiated salary increases with the city's 4 bargaining units. You can see the POAs, our Police Officers Association, would have a 27% increase in wages over those 5 years, a 26% increase either has already occurred or is scheduled to occur for our firefighters, 19% increase for all of our miscellaneous employees. Currently, we'd be at a 10% increase for management employees over that same time frame. And that's assuming that the management employees who are scheduled to get a raise in January of 2010 actually get that raise. There's a strong likelihood that that raise will not occur, in which case the management increase in raises wouldn't be 10%, it would be more in the neighborhood of 5% or 6% over those 5 years. And the bottom line shows you that in comparison to the growth we've experienced in discretionary revenues. Between fiscal year 2005 when we entered into these contracts and fiscal year 2010, with the meltdown in the economy, we've only experienced 4% growth in our major discretionary revenues, which are the funds we have to really fund our staffing over the 5-year period. Pulling all the information together, you can see our projected revenues compared to expenditures for fiscal year 08-09 results in a $4 million gap that balloons up to nearly a $20 million gap in fiscal year 2010. Again, a combination of declining revenues and growing personnel costs and other costs. Net cost by department. What net cost essentially is getting at is a lot of the city's programs and departments generate revenues through the services they provide. Through the recreational courses, for example, that are provided, people pay a fee. If you take those fees and subtract them from the cost of delivering those services, you essentially get at the net cost of a department or the net cost of a service, which needs to equal for a balanced budget, your discretionary revenues. Deducting those programmatic revenues out of the equation, you end up with $105 million is the net cost of all these different functions you have up on this pie chart. This is the amount that needs to be funded through our major discretionary revenues. Those sales taxes, those property taxes, those motor vehicle license fees, those transient occupancy taxes, all that revenue needs to support the funding that's shown on this pie chart. And so when there's reductions in those areas, this pie chart needs to shrink to keep the budget in balance. You can see of that $105 million of discretionary funds, $79 million goes to our police and fire services and our public works, our maintenance services. $26 million is allocated to all of our other city departments: planning, engineering, library, recreation, all the support departments, finance, IT, human resources, all of those support functions take up $26 million. What it's showing is that with a gap of $19 million, it's simply not feasible to get $19 million out of $26 million. It's just not feasible to get a $19 million reduction in the budget without impacting some of the core police, fire, and public works services.
Can we ask questions?
Of course.
What support departments?
The support departments are your finance department, your information technology department,
So City Hall?
pretty much City Hall, the attorneys, the clerks, human resources, administration.
Well, are these slides, is that slide in still it's different in the budget as far as the percentage goes of police and fire?
I believe the slide in the budget is just showing their portion of the general fund budget. So there's two numbers here. There's $143 million, which is the total general fund budget. About a little bit less than 50% of that goes to police and fire. Now, if you take that $143 million general fund budget and strip out what I'm calling program revenues, just strip out the revenues that are actually generated by a specific service or program, such as your recreational fees, your library fines, and those types of things, you're left with $105 million, which are what we call discretionary revenues. They can be allocated to any number of services, and this is just showing how those discretionary funds are allocated to the different services. So it's different than the pie chart of the budget. Some of the budget balancing options that the city has considered is renegotiating the memorandums of understanding that we have with the city's 4 bargaining units. We have begun, we have approached and are having discussions with our 4 bargaining units currently. There's a 4% salary increase that is scheduled for all represented employees in January of 2009. Actually, for police officers, it's a 3%. For all other employees, it's 4%. And then in January 2010, it's 4% for all of employees. The annual cost of those 2 raises combined is about $6.5 million. And so we are having discussions with the bargaining units about the impact that those cost increases are having on the city's budgets. Tax and fee increases are an option. Sales taxes is the one that can generate the most money. There has been some success locally and across the state in terms of sales tax initiatives. Most of the sales tax initiatives that were brought forth and November 4th passed. The two local ones in La Mesa and El Cajon that were brought forward passed. The repeal of the sales tax increase in National City failed. And so there has been some support in other jurisdictions for sales tax increases to avoid the types of service impacts you're going to be seeing in a moment. TOT is the money that's paid when people use our hotels. It's currently 10%, so increasing that to, there are at least one jurisdiction in the county charges 12%. The amount of revenue you generate from such a tax increase is not nearly as much as the sales tax increase. UUT, user utilities tax, and we are currently looking at our development processing fees to make sure that those fees are in line with the cost of delivering those services. So renegotiating them, we use tax and fee increases, and then the final option is looking at further program and staffing reductions. I say further because this is not the first round of budget reductions the city's had to make. We made a lot of reductions in fiscal year 2008. This is another round of budget reductions. And they can come in different forms. The first two bullets here don't result in layoffs of city employees. Continuing a hiring freeze so that through attrition, as people leave the organization, you just freeze those positions and you don't fund them. We've had a lot of success with incentivizing people who are close to retirement to retiring a little bit earlier than they otherwise would. There's a cost to that incentive, but the cost is small compared to the savings of not having that person on payroll anymore. So those are both kind of doing it through attrition. You don't really have control over the service impacts and where they're going to occur. The plus side is it doesn't result in layoffs. The downside is you don't have control over where the reductions are going to occur, but nonetheless there would be reductions in staffing. There are service impacts that result from those efforts. And then of course just employee layoffs to reduce the budget is another option. This slide is showing the fiscal year, first column shows the fiscal year 2007 staffing by department or functional area. This is where the city reached its peak staffing of 1,263 employees. Between 2001, really, 2002 and 2007, a lot of positions were added throughout the city to service the new areas. And then since 2007, we've had to make a significant amount of reductions. The second column labeled previous reductions shows the number of full-time benefited staffing positions that were eliminated in order to get the fiscal year 2008 budget balanced. You can see 160 positions have been cut to date. The third column is showing the further reductions that are currently being proposed in order to deal with this $20 million annual gap that we're projecting. A total of 165 positions. Combining the two shows you the results in the proposed staffing, and then the final column is the percentage reduction. So you can see some truly huge numbers up there. By fiscal year 2010, under this proposed plan, coupled with what's already been cut, you'd see a 52% reduction in staffing in the library. 47% reduction in staffing of the Rec and Nature Center. Actually, I'll talk about a little bit elimination of closing of the Nature Center. You can see the smallest reductions near the bottom happening primarily in fire and police, but nonetheless pretty large numbers, 17 and 16% staffing reductions in those areas. Again, coming back to the net cost figure, really hard to get this level of cuts in your budget without impacting those core service areas. But nonetheless, they have experienced the smallest percentage reduction in staffing, or two of the smallest percentage reductions in staffing. Looking at staffing per 1,000 ratios, you can see a dramatic dip as the population of the city really hasn't shrunk. The lane miles of street to be maintained, the acres of parks to be maintained, none of that has shrunk, but the staffing has needed to, out of necessity for budgetary purposes, had to shrink. We had historically in the city had about 5.3, 5.4, maybe as high as 5.5 staff per 1,000 citizens. That under this proposal would shrink all the way down to 4 staff per 1,000 employees, and there's significant service impacts that go with that reduction in staffing.